Hey everybody, it's Caitlin here with my discussion board post for the NPO stakeholders module. I'm going to mix it up a little today, and I'm going to start with prompt number 3 and then circle back around for the other two, just because I think this one was the most fact-based and references the most articles, so I really want to lead off with it. When we just dive into the definition of the stakeholder concept, personally, I think when you're defining anything, specifically a concept, it's really important to look at the historical basis with it, which is why I really found a lot of ground and information, I guess, or the best basis for that in the Freeman and Reed article, where they talk about how the phrase stakeholder wasn't even coined until just over 60 years ago when the Stanford research group coined it as groups whose support basically keeps organizations alive, who they could not exist without. And then we move through the progression of some future development, and where we get to the current concept where Freeman and Reed found this to be too generic, providing a true definition of the different segments of the audience that are the stakeholders. When putting into that hold a stake in the organization's success, and they provide two different definitions of a stakeholder. They have the wide sense, which includes any group that or individual that affects the success of an organization as a stakeholder, and then the more narrow sense, which is much more in line with what the Stanford group originally had, which is just any group or individual that an organization cannot survive without as a stakeholder. And then in his lecture, Dr. Brown actually references the concept of the segmented sections of an organization's audience that is what should be viewed as a stakeholder. And then in his 2021 paper, it lists off the different research that puts those stakeholders specifically into 7 different groups. So basically, we see this evolution of stakeholders just being any type of group that has any part in the success of an organization, specifically in a nonprofit organization. Turning to the second part of the prompt with a specific nonprofit stakeholder category in his 2021 paper, again with listing the group, there are 7 types of stakeholders. Specifically, I'm going to focus on the board as the governance of nonprofit and who makes the decisions and who does the managing of the specific group. And those are based on an expansion of Freeman's stakeholder concepts. Mack and her co-authors in their fundraising stakeholder article further explore the discipline of nonprofit management. So not so much as specific individuals, but they explore throughout the article this specific field of nonprofit management and what the requirement that it has of taking an active role in organizations' fundraising, which obviously leads us to other key stakeholders in an organization, such as donors and their contributions and how the two intersect. And another thing that I really liked about the article when describing the board component of a stakeholder in a nonprofit organization was the educational base for the discipline. And they talk about how it is a field that does benefit from their research with having a liberal arts curriculum and practical field experience with success for that. And moving away from prompt number 3, I'm going to move to prompt number 1, an example of a nonprofit using one-way propaganda type communication. I thought this was a really fun question, especially that anybody that's had experience with nonprofits, volunteering, serving as a stakeholder volunteer or serving as a stakeholder donor to nonprofits, or even just a member of a local community where a nonprofit has a presence, I feel like has definitely experienced direct one-way propaganda from an organization. I think one specific example that I'll discuss here that I've experienced is messages, specifically text messages that we've seen an influx in the last few years. And I've gotten these from organizations as large as the Salvation Army to like small local theaters that I serve as a donor, or that are just like in my community, that I take part as a stakeholder as a local community word of mouth to encourage people to go to the shows, related to the relatively recent movement. I believe it was started in the early 2010s, of Giving Tuesday, where organizations are targeting key stakeholders in the community, specifically donors, to encourage them to donate in response to post-Thanksgiving, Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales, basically pulling on the heartstrings and the guilt to get them to do that. And the way this is one-way propaganda is the messages are obviously coming directly to your phone. There's no responsorial aspect, there's no communication. It's just an influx of messages. The messages often highlight the short time frame for the donation window, because it is one day and there are large goals they're meeting, and they're trying to usually do like one big project. They're very much encouraging donors to donate very quickly. With that, it doesn't give them much time to think about it, and it kind of takes away not only that communication but the donor component of consideration with it, just like internal communication. And also with not having a response route, it doesn't really provide a response route for the response in that. It's very much like triggering the like now or never response for donors, basically saying like, this is the goal, this is what's happening, this is the time you have to do it, let's get it done. And it's very much one way, and at least for myself, I've seen messages where you're just getting them throughout the day, like constant updates, whether you ask for them or not. Just if you've interacted with them in the past, they're really trying to keep you at that point, and very much have those like propaganda of like, it's now, it's never, like this is the only way we're going to meet our goal. And rounding it out with prompt number 2, with an example of nonprofits using two-way engaging conversations with a key stakeholder. This one I was really excited about because I actually have an example of like a legitimate two-way conversation. I think I've seen this a lot personally, and I've participated. There's a local nonprofit in Washington, D.C. that I've done a lot of work with. It's called Safe Shores. It's the district's Children Advocacy Center. They're a really great organization. I know that's a little biased, but one event that they do is they do coffee for kids, and they host it every other week. And what it is it's targeted at, again, the key stakeholder in the community of donors, this is a segment that's outlined in Freeman's stakeholder concepts and included in the list in Dr. Brown's 2021 article. It's really interesting because they send emails out and contact all of the donors that have donated fundraising to their organization throughout the year, have donated to their different supply drives, and they invite them to come to their organization, either virtually or in person, to take a tour, and they provide coffee or virtual coffee. And during the tour, the members that run the organization give communication of what they have done with those donations, what services are at the center, what updates they've had recently, what they've been able to pay for, what projects are currently in the works. And then in response to that, the stakeholders of the donors are able to ask any questions that they have about how resources are being used, about services, about anything. They're very transparent. They can ask to see the financials of the organization, but then they can also, there's also very much like a providing ideas component, because the organization is always looking for different ways to get people involved, whether that's different donation opportunities or mostly different donation opportunities, but or like other things that they have, that people may want to donate, or other opportunities that people don't even know of things they're donating. But they're very much always looking for input at these events, and that is, I've spoken with the people there when I've gone to them, and that's very much was the concept behind this, was to create that two-way channel to where it wasn't just them constantly speaking at the stakeholder of donors, but to bring the information and the communication back into them, back into the organization, to make sure that they were able to make sure those donors like knew their place. And also I think that's a good way of like external organizational listening that we read about in the reading, with the importance of that. Obviously that's importance of internal, but this is very much like listening externally and making sure that they're keeping the donors appraised of the situation, and making sure that they're keeping those donors loyal. But yeah, those were my discussion of 3 prompts, and I look forward to reading everybody else's. Bye.